A New York landlord who also happens to be a politician and state assembly member is trying to evict a tenant who hasn't paid rent since 2018. But he says that she should pay him. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have this interesting story for you out of New York, and it has to do with a state assembly member, this politician who also happens to be a landlord. Now, obviously, I like it when I hear that, hey, you know what, some of these politicians out there, they are pro landlord because they actually own property for themselves and they understand all of the ins and outs of the landlord business. So, when I heard about this story, I was like, man, this is awful. This is absolutely awful. There's this politician who, is also a landlord, and she basically hasn't been paid rent for this from this guy for 5 years. Okay. He's been living freeloading in her unit for 5 years. And when they went in to talk to the guy, he was like, well, she owes me money. I'm like, how is that possible if you haven't paid rent in 5 years? How is that possible? It's not possible. Okay, you're living in fantasy world. And I thought this was the perfect example to show you what the landlords have to deal with these super duper entitled tenants. Of course, this is a rent controlled unit, and these tenants, they feel like they own the property, not the actual property owner. And the landlord, this politician, actually admits that she doesn't make any money off of the properties whatsoever. So, yeah, this is hilarious. When you read the whole story, you're like, well, you know what? They're trying to smear her in a certain way. But when you read the actual details of the story, it looks like the tenant's a scumbag. The landlord's getting screwed over by not just the rent control system, but the strong tenant protections in New York. And this whole thing is, the exact reason why I tell people, hey, don't if you're a new real estate investor, you might seriously consider not buying a property up in a place that has all of these strong tenant protections, rent control, and they treat you like you don't actually own the property. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. What do you think of politicians who also happen to be landlords? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? I personally, I'm in favor of it. I actually understand that we need more people up in everywhere who understand what landlords go through and don't think that we're just evil. And they're going to stand up for property rights and our constitutional rights. So yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's kind of odd though that sometimes landlords will, I guess, just because they want power or they want votes, they will vote against their own best interests. They'll try to pass laws that will bankrupt themselves if they are implemented. And that makes no sense to me. So, it's not always the case that a politician will be on our side, even if they are a landlord. But in more cases than not, I think that is true. Okay. So, anyway, let's get into this article. It's a really interesting story. This article is coming from cityandstateny.com, and it says Inez Dickens has moved to evict the tenant while running for office. The assembly member said the tenant hasn't paid rent in years, but she has been criticized as a slumlord before. Yeah, so they're going about this as though, well, she's in the wrong, she's a slumlord. But as we go through this article, you're going to see that no, that's not necessarily the case. So anyway, let's get into it. Assembly member Inez Dickens is trying to evict a tenant at the same time she's asking Democratic voters in Harlem to get her back into New York City Council. Dickens is the president of 1389 Construction Corp., which sued Albert Anderson in January, claiming he hasn't paid rent since June of 2018 for his apartment on the famed Strivers Row at West 139th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. The parties are due in Manhattan Housing Court on June 5th, just 3 weeks before primary day, where Anderson is eligible to vote as a registered Democrat in District 9. So, okay, I was wrong. She's not a state assembly member. It looks like she was part of the New York City Council. Okay, so my mistake. Sometimes I make mistakes. I don't understand the exact, way that they put their political positions in place up in New York. But, the point is that she's a politician. She's also a landlord. And, they're trying. It sounds like they're trying to smear her as though she is a slumlord, right? Because she had some problems with her properties in the past, but she hasn't had any property or problems recently with her properties. So let's continue. The Dickens campaign said after years of non payment, Dickens' company applied for emergency rental assistance program money on his behalf in 2021, but that only covered $11,250 of the total. And Anderson still owes $41,850. Anderson didn't respond to phone calls from city and state, but he disagreed with his landlord's claims in a February court filing, arguing, among other things, that the $750 a month charged isn't the legal rent and that Dickens actually owes him money. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if you think that what I said was wrong, no, no, no. That's what it says here in this article. This guy believes that the $750 rent controlled price that he's paying is too much and that the landlord is fraudulently charging him too much. Now, just imagine you are, you're living in New York, right, in this building, and it sounds like the building is in Manhattan, okay? Harlem is in Manhattan. So you're living in Manhattan and paying $750 a month. And you're like, oh no, that's too much. This isn't legal. You owe me money because the rent that I paid was way more than it should have been. I should have only been paying $200 a month. This is such an idiot. What entitlement this tenant has. And even if that's the case, after 5 years of non payment, there is no way that you owe this landlord a penny, or that the landlord owes you a penny. You owe the landlord tens of thousands of dollars. Now, I think the mistake that this landlord made was that she applied for the emergency rental assistance. Okay, so she was compensated $11,250 according to the article, and he still owes over 40 grand, right? But by applying for that emergency rental assistance and getting paid it, I believe that the eviction protections they put in place make it so that she can't remove him from the property now. Basically, you accept this money, you can never evict this tenant. Or you can't, it's very difficult to evict that tenant. So that's why he's still up in there, even after she got paid the rental assistance, even though he owes like over 40 grand. This is absolutely horrible for the landlord, okay? And this guy, he is so entitled. In his mind, he's like, well, I'm in the right, you're in the wrong. And I'm like, dude, you are living for free for 5 years, right? Regardless of whether someone else is paying your rent or not, right? For, paying that rental assistance money for you or not. You personally have not paid a dime in 5 years. You've been living it up. Where's your savings at? You're probably spending it on other things, alcohol, tobacco, drugs, gambling. Those are the things that I always assume that people spend their money on when they, don't, like there's nothing to show for the fact that they were living for free for years on end, okay? This guy's a horrible tenant, okay? He's taking advantage of this landlord, and this landlord has every right to try to evict him. So regardless of whether they think that she's a slumlord or not, or whether they like her or not, right? It is obvious to everyone who reads this article that he is the one who is taking advantage of the situation. Out of the 34 tenants that Inez has, Mr. Anderson is the only one experiencing this issue, said Dickens campaign spokesperson Sophia Quintanar, adding that almost all of Dickens' units are rent stabilized and she does not make a profit off of them. She provides well-maintained and affordable housing for her tenants, most of whom are able to live in Manhattan for under $1,000 a month. So yeah, she says right there, hey, landlord doesn't make any money off of these properties. Okay, now I don't know if she's playing the appreciation game where she's just hoping that, hey, if I own these properties for long enough, they will appreciate, and that way I'll be able to make I'll make money down the line when I eventually do sell. But as far as the rents covering, the costs, maybe she's breaking even, but she's not making any money. Okay, you're up here criticizing this landlord. You're up here attacking her. You haven't paid rent in 5 years. None of her other tenants have these problems, and she isn't even making any money, you know. So if you think she's gouging you, I mean, I don't see how she's gouging you when you haven't paid her. You haven't paid her. Okay? You are the in the wrong. What does it take to convince these people that, yeah, but you know what the problem is? The problem is once you give somebody a, you know, one of these socialist entitlements, right? Once you give somebody an entitlement, they never want to give it up and they expect more, okay? And they will sit here and complain. It's, you know, it's like you're getting something for free and it's not good enough, or you're getting something at a substantial discount and it's not good enough. You want more. Well, you know what? This is the reason why we don't give things away for free. Everything has to be paid for. This is why people don't deserve discounts, okay? Because they feel like, oh well, it's my, you know, you need to come up with more. You need to make sure that I never have to pay anything. Well, you know what? In the real world, that's not the way things work. Okay. Court documents suggest this is the only recent eviction proceedings Dickens or her company are involved in, and the 16-unit building Anderson lives in doesn't have any open housing complaints or violations. However, Dickens was criticized as a slumlord a decade ago for racking up nearly 200 city infractions in her buildings, conditions so bad that some tenants declared a rent strike. So they say that, oh, 10 plus years ago, she had some problems in her building, but now there are no problems, but she's a slumlord. Okay, well, if you had a bunch of problems, a bunch of violations, you went through and fixed them, that doesn't mean you're a slumlord. That just means you're a good landlord. Okay? You went through and you fixed all the problems, and now there are no problems, but you're criticizing her as a slumlord. Now, I'm not saying she's a great politician. I'm not saying to vote for this lady. What I am saying is, right, I respect her as a landlord for keeping her, you know, keeping her rents low, keeping her buildings in good shape, and that she's basically getting screwed over by these tenants who are taking advantage of her. So I don't know what her play is with these rent control buildings, and you know, I personally wouldn't be messing with it, but hopefully she's able to get this tenant up out of there because, you know, this is a scumbag move. This is an entitled, you know, lazy, good for nothing tenant who is taking advantage of the situation so that they can live for free for the last 5 years.